I do want to start this video by saying I do apologize for not getting this video out a week earlier, because I'm sure, as you guys probably saw in the video that came before this, or at least one of the videos that came before this, I was sick with the flu, and I couldn't get up enough focus to do anything, and I was also kind of quarantined in the house, so we weren't actually able to go see Captain Marvel until about 2 days after we had originally planned it, but now I'm able to talk about it, and Captain Marvel is the latest Marvel Cinematic Universe film that's right before the culmination that's going to be Avengers Endgame, and that means that we're 2 months away from it, and I'm very excited about it. But anyway, let's focus on this one, because this film introduces us to a new superhero, Captain Marvel, aka Carol Danvers. In this film, we're taken back to the 1990s, and at this point, the Kree warrior known as Veers, which is Carol's Kree name, but you'll understand it when you see the movie. You know, she's been fighting under the Kree Star Force for a few years now, and at this point she does not recall really any of her past, other than maybe a couple of flashbacks that don't necessarily mean anything to her at that point. When she's sent on a mission to destroy not destroy, but take out a band of Skrulls, which are these shape-shifting aliens that are known for taking over entire worlds. She makes her way to Earth and teams up with a very young Nick Fury to find the Skrulls. While she's doing that, she starts to uncover a bit more about her past. And as I always like to do, I like to start with a little disclaimer. For those of the uninitiated, you know, the people who've never seen any of my videos, the way that I break down my thoughts for my reviews is that I do a pro and con list. And, you know, it's pretty simple. Pro is everything that I liked about the movie or loved about the movie. All the cons are the things that were either bad in my opinion or something that was lacking a certain quality. That kind of thing. And I try to keep the sections separate, but sometimes I'll use different ones to transition into the other one, like if a pro happens to transition into a con, vice versa. But for the most part, I do try to keep them separate. Okay, there's your disclaimer. Let's go ahead and get into the pros. First thing that stood out to me as a very big pro while watching this movie was in the de-aging visual effects, specifically on Samuel L. Jackson's character, Nick Fury. And, you know, not many people know this, but the very first film to actually use de-aging visual techniques was actually X-Men Last Stand with Magneto and Charles Xavier. And I just remember being amazed watching it the first time, because I had no idea that we were at the point where we could actually do that. I mean, looking back now, it's kind of outdated, the technology used for that, and you can see that in other movies like Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which did it right after, but it's still amazing that we're able to do that. And with each movie that they've done, especially in the MCU, each time that they've used de-aging techniques, whether it's in Winter Soldier or Ant-Man, it's gotten slightly, if not much, better compared to the previous film that did it last. And this one, it was amazing just how good this was. The use of the de-aging on Nick Fury is by far the best that any film has done to date. The only time that I noticed was when Nick Fury initially showed up, because then I thought, oh my god, that's Samuel L. Jackson, and he actually looks younger. And, you know, afterwards, I didn't really think about it again, and you know that a visual effect is good when you don't notice that it's, you know, that it's created, that it's not actually there. And to add to the immersion of this being a younger Nick Fury than maybe we're used to, Jackson does an outstanding job portraying this character, which, again, he's had a few years to do it, but the character's written a lot different and performed a lot different than normal, because this is a younger Nick Fury. This is before, you know, he became more jaded and more naturally untrusting of others. You know, a Nick Fury who hasn't gone through all the things that made him the Nick Fury that we met at the very end of the first Iron Man movie. And also, speaking of his character, the movie really starts gaining momentum in my eyes from the moment when Captain Marvel and Fury meet for the first time. Right then we get this buddy cop feel to the story, and their interactions are probably what will make the movie stand out for most people, what will really make it for most viewers. And these moments are where you get the most of that quintessential MCU humor, and it was just a delight to experience. And not referring to the script right now, which I will touch on a little bit later, but this Captain Marvel's main story, just the underlying story inside the script, may be one of the better stories in the MCU, just in my opinion. I was fully intrigued with the story throughout. Now, that may be because I'm not as familiar with Captain Marvel in the comics, and, as I am with other characters, but, hey, I was still surprised at how much I got out of the story itself, and one of the aspects that really helped was the fact that it didn't try to use the same formula that they've used in a lot of their other origin stories in the past. They experimented a little bit with what an origin movie could be, going against a few of the known tropes, or taking some of those tropes and kind of twisting them in a different way than maybe a lot of us were expecting. It may not work for some people. I know Mallory wasn't as much of a fan of this change. She actually would have preferred, the standard origin story tropes, which was funny because she's not even a big Marvel fan. But anyway, it's all based off of the eyes of the beholder, the viewer, and from this viewer's perspective, it was done very well. And this next one's going to touch more on the fact that even though I'm a comic fan, I still don't know what the hell I'm talking about half the time. Knowing little to nothing about the Skrulls going into this movie, other than, just the basic description of their comic book iterations, the whole shape-shifting part and everything. Because as I've said before, I'm only slightly versed in comics overall. My expectations were subverted in the end when it came to those, and I'm not going to go any further on their role in the film, but personally, I would like to know what those of you who are watching this, who are way more versed in the comics than I am, who have a bit more insight into the Skrulls, please comment down below on what you think about how they tackled them in this movie, and try to keep it as spoiler-free as possible. But I feel that even though I enjoyed it, maybe people who are more familiar with them in the comics could possibly not enjoy how they were portrayed, and I haven't heard anyone online really specifically talk about them in that sense, whether it's they have a positive view on it or a negative point of view. And speaking of the Skrulls, the main Skrull in the movie, Talos the Untamed, was played by Ben Mendelsohn, and I thought he did a fantastic job. He's not a higher tier Marvel villain, but I actually thought he was at least second tier villain for a MCU film, and you could tell that he was having a lot of fun with his character. They gave him a little bit more development, but they made him feel a little bit more like a person. He was having fun with the character. He got to be a little goofy and loose, but also flex a bit of his dramatic side as well. Captain Marvel had one of the more unique musical scores for an MCU film, mostly focusing on synth and techno music in the background. And personally for me, many of the MCU scores don't particularly stand out for me, so it was kind of a nice change. And hell, I'll go ahead and say it, I don't care too much for Black Panther's Oscar-winning score. I actually liked Captain Marvel's score more, but you know what, that's fine. I'm ready for your judgment. I also want to, before I actually forget, because I know if I don't throw it in now, I'm going to forget a little bit later, but I want to throw in a couple of extras before I go forward with the pros. Again, lest I forget later, because I know I will. But 3 things that I felt important to keep an eye out for in the movie. Make sure that you watch the mid-credit scene, which is, in my opinion, one of the most important mid to end credit scenes that they've ever made for these movies. I would even put it at my number 2 favorite as far as importance. Number 1 being the Nick Fury one at the end of the first Iron Man movie. Sorry, I just blanked out. when you're going to the movie, make sure that you show up sometime during the trailers because of that that Marvel intro, the Marvel Studios intro that they do right before each movie. They do something really special with it that I was not expecting, and it's just I don't want to spoil it. It's really amazing. And then the third thing is that they pay tribute to Stan Lee in a very special way that I was not expecting in this movie. You'll notice it when it happens. Just, you know, remember to show up early so that you don't miss any of these things. And a small nod, but Goose the cat is a definite highlight, though for me, that's mostly because he's a very interactive cat and he's really adorable. You know, I'm primarily a dog person, but I love a good cat every once in a while, as long as they're not, you know, normal assholes. If they're playful, I love them. Oh, and Goose has this interesting quirk that if you're not familiar with the cat in the comics, then I leave that at your disposal to discover for yourself, but this cat's cool. Really, really awesome. Now, I've put off my thoughts on Brie Larson for a bit, so here it is. I actually think that Brie Larson did a really good job in her portrayal as Captain America, or at least what I saw from it, because again, not familiar with the comic character. I was never worried about her being good. I mean, she's an Oscar-winning actress, for Christ's sake, and all these claims by people online that she doesn't show emotion is pretty much bullshit, you know. And although I enjoyed the performance itself, and I'm actually going to use this part to transition into the cons, on a writing and direction level, I didn't care for the character. They were juggling a little too much between her being a serious and mysterious person to her being kind of a jokester. And, I don't know, you can make that work. Hell, look at what they did with Thor, not just from how tonal the movie was from Thor to Thor Ragnarok, but that character was always a mix of seriousness and joking, but it just felt more natural, I think. But it didn't work with Captain Marvel, and because of this tonal inconsistency with her character, it made it much more difficult for me to actually connect with her character. And keeping it going with the topic of tonal inconsistency, the film does this as well overall. One of the things that I have always looked forward to with each MCU release, and I've mentioned this many times before, and I will continue to mention this each time I do anything for a Marvel film, or at least most likely I will, but that's beside the point. I love the fact that each film, though all connected, feel like they have their own type of style, whether it's the way that the director, you know, the way that they craft the film overall, or even if it's just playing with genres, you know. Like, examples are Winter Soldier being a political thriller, Spider-Man Homecoming being a high school comedy in the vein of a John Hughes film, Ant-Man being a heist film, and that's just to name a couple. But Captain Marvel doesn't have its own identity, sadly. They try doing multiple things at once, and the lack of focus does not help it at all. And, you know, one moment it'll be a buddy cop comedy, you know, and then the next moment it'll be a fish out of water story. Two concepts that were tackled much better in other films. Hell, for Thor, no less in his origin movie and Thor Ragnarok, you got to see it. You got to see both of those. You saw the fish out of water story with Thor, which that was tackled very well, and then you saw the more comedic side with Thor Ragnarok, and it worked then. Captain Marvel as a film looks and feels like it's just another standard superhero movie to me, and not the same as style, but still as prevalent. As far as the visual look of everything, you know, whether it's the cinematography or production design or even visual effects, there are moments where everything does look fantastic. However, in the last year, Marvel has shown, especially with Avengers Infinity War, that they're capable of some amazing things, especially when it comes to achieving this sort of realism through their visual effects. And, you know, think of Thanos, for instance. But, you know, and when I made my Black Panther review, I mentioned that the that the visual effects in that movie were extremely questionable, especially since Marvel had shown what they were capable of, especially when working with Weta Digital, who are actually the people responsible for quite a few things. I suggest you look up their Wikipedia page. It's Weta Digital, W-E-T-A, and they've done some amazing things. Like, one of the things that I didn't realize was that they tackled all of the visual effects for all 3 Lord of the Rings movies, and those movies still look great today. And most recently, they were nominated for an Oscar for the work that they did in Avengers Infinity War, specifically with Thanos. I'm going to stop rambling about that, but anyway, back to Captain Marvel. Sadly, I must say that Captain Marvel has many instances of questionable CGI moments where it's so blatantly obvious that, you know, everything was either on a green screen or certain things in the scene were not actually there. A lot of uncanny valley moments, mostly, like, almost recurring. You know, a few notable ones are when they need the cat to do something that obviously they couldn't get the cat to do in real life, and, you know, you would just see this CGI cat and it would look absolutely terrible. And another example, you remember I said that the de-aging on Samuel L. Jackson was amazing? Because it really was. They didn't skimp on that once. For Agent Coulson, it looked pretty good until his last scene. In his last scene, he had a very glossy look over his entire skin, and whenever he would move, it just felt like it wasn't going at the same frames per second as the rest of the scene. So, you know, it kind of reminded me of the baby vampire from Twilight, only not as bad. One pet peeve of mine when it comes to film is when there's a fight scene utilizing at least a fair amount of CGI, and it's in a dark room or an area. There's a fight near the end of the movie where it's just like that, and just thinking about that scene makes me think of the fact that whenever there are scenes with loads of CGI, the texture of this film was just... It would be very bleak with muted colors, making the film look very visually uninteresting to a point. It did make those moments where the colors actually popped out look much more beautiful. It does do that. I'll give them props on that, but it didn't pop out consistently enough to where I was able to focus on that. Instead, my brain kind of forced me to focus more on the parts where it just looked bleak. They also brought back Lee Pace to reprise his role as Ronan the Accuser, the main villain from the first Guardians of the Galaxy film, and really, if you just had a different person in the role and not ever mentioned that it was Ronan, I don't think I ever would have noticed that it was, you know, supposed to be him. That character could have been any other Kree, and it wouldn't have taken away from anything that happened in the film at large. It really wouldn't have. As far as Jude Law in the film, I wasn't a big fan of his character. It was so predictable what his role was going to be in the film. I don't know why I got words switched around in my head, but, you know, he was also a little too goofy. Not the, oh, I'm trying to be goofy because that's how I'm written, but more like he was trying to be serious, but the writing for him was just a little too silly. And of course, we all knew from the trailers, from every trailer that we saw, that they would play up the fact that this movie was set in the 90s, and, you know, they would potentially bombard us with nostalgia, although not potentially, because that's what a lot of movies do these days. And of course, it bombarded me, in my opinion. For maybe for others, decade nostalgia can really go a long way in improving a movie and making it more enjoyable, but it never really has for me. Instead of helping me feel immersed in the film, the references kind of took away the immersion for me. So in the long run, I did come out enjoying myself with Captain America. Captain Marvel. I came out enjoying myself with Captain Marvel, but I was personally let down by the film. Sometimes it's difficult to keep my expectations in check, because after all, before being a film critic, I am first and foremost a human and a personal fan of the MCU at large. you know, there's a couple of films that I don't necessarily care for, but overall I think they've made some amazing films. And so I was expecting a lot more from this franchise after so long, and, you know, personally I compare this film to Phase 1 film, and that's not an insult towards Phase 1 films. Quite a few of them are actually really good, especially Thor, and the first Iron Man, and Captain America, First Avenger, and of course, The Avengers. That one's one of the greatest comic book movies of all time, but that's beside the point. Most of the Phase 1 movies were good, but you could tell that they were still trying to figure out what they wanted to be as a franchise, you know, what exactly they wanted to do, and it was so early in that lifespan of a cinematic universe that, you know, it made sense. And now we're near the end of Phase 4, I think. Hold on. Let me look this up real quick. Okay, so apparently we're still in Phase 3. Jesus Christ. This phase has been going on for so many films. Okay, anyway, so now we're in Phase 3. We're about to start Phase 4 after Avengers Endgame. So we've been going on for a while. Anyway, Captain Marvel should not have been having this issue of feeling like it doesn't know what it wants to be. It should have been more cohesive overall. And like Black Panther, while I thought it was an okay movie, it's, you know, it's nothing that I have the urge to actually buy and own. Maybe every once in a while when I see it on Disney Plus when it comes out, maybe I'll watch it, but I'm never really going to, you know, think in the back of my mind, oh, I need to see this again right now. Oh, and also, one last thing. I did not go into this movie hoping that it would either succeed or fail because it's a female-led movie. If you happen to go in and, you know, was hoping that it would succeed because of all of the anti-female backlash, or maybe you're a mom or an older sister and you wanted, you know, another good female role model for the younger ladies in your life. I'll go ahead and say ladies. You know, if you were looking for that, hey, I'm really happy for you, especially since the film became profitable before its first weekend was even done. So I think that's awesome. But if you went in hoping that it would bomb simply because of the fact that it is a female-led film, and you were part of any kind of smear campaign trying to discredit the film simply because of some kind of sexual reason, I have to say, you are not welcome in any discussions or chats that go on this channel. I only have time for those who have legitimate opinions on movies, and if you simply do not like a movie based on its own merits and not some kind of agenda, that's fine. You're still welcome in these kinds of discussions. But if you hate a movie so much, or even love it so much, that you attack anyone who has a different opinion from you, or you smear on a film simply because it focuses on a lead female or a lead minority, you can fuck off right now. Honestly, that last part sounded cooler in my head because I was just imagining listening to it in the video and me just getting bleeped out. I wish I could do that in my videos, but, you know, I don't think I have the capability, and if I do, I haven't discovered how to do it yet. And those are my feelings on the film. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm sorry I'm sorry that it got a little too long-winded with everything. I didn't mean to bring down the mood if I did for any of you. I felt like I needed to get that off my chest because I've had those thoughts for a while, and, you know, I may actually add that onto a new channel trailer for anybody new, but I do want to start stressing in the future my thoughts on things like that. But anyway, with all that being said, if you enjoyed the video, please do not hesitate to hit that like button, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so that you can keep up to date with everything that's going on the channel. And, you know, don't forget to keep the conversation going on down in the comments, or down in the comment section down below. I really love seeing what you guys think about the different movies that I talk about, you know, just getting your opinions on them. And again, keep it Keep it simple. Just make it a debate. Do not argue with anybody. Do not attack anybody, please. That's all I ask. But with all that being said, farewell until the next video, all of you movie fans and casual moviegoers alike, and keep on being awesome.